Bassist Petros Klampanis joins us from Greece to discuss his new album Irrationalities and play a little solo bass for us. And trust me, you've never heard solo bass quite like this before. Plus, online editor Matt Micucci is here to talk about 5 albums that turned 50 in 2020. I'm Brian Zimmerman, and this is the Jazziz Happy Hour. All right, and before we get into today's programming, I want to quickly let you know about Blue Sound. Blue Sound is an award-winning wireless high-res sound system that lets you play music in any and every room throughout your home. You choose music from your favorite streaming service and connect it to a home library or network via a free Blue OS app. And that's it. You can bounce music from room to room to room and getting the kind of crisp audiophile-grade sound system that every Jazziz fan and jazz fan deserves has never been easier. For more information, visit bluesound.com or check out our website, jazziz.com, where we have put together a Blue Sound buyer's guide. On that note, welcome to the Jazziz Happy Hour, the internet's most happening jazz bar. I'm happy you can join us because our guest today is bassist Petros Klampanis. He's a phenomenal musician, currently splitting his time between Greece and New York. Well, right now he's kind of sequestered in Greece. You may remember that Petros was a guest on an earlier Jazziz Brunch episode, but that episode was kind of disrupted by technical difficulties. We have sorted those out. Petros is back, and you are going to be glad he is, because until you've heard Petros play the acoustic bass and slap it and bang it and strum it and whistle into it and shake things near it, you haven't heard this instrument as it is supposed to be played. He has released a new album called Irrationalities. It is out right now. And he is also in the midst of releasing a Rooftop series in which he takes his bass from to various cities around the world and performs on rooftops. So you get a nice view of the city and you get to hear some great music. He's going to be here to talk to us about all that. And online editor Matt Micucci is here to talk about 5 albums that turned 50 in 2020. So it's a great episode in store for you. As I mentioned, Petros is here. He's waiting in the wings. Let's go ahead and bring him in.
Hello.
Hey,
I'm very well.
Good, dude. You are good. You mentioned that it was very hot in Greece. So we're glad you're here and bearing with the heat to be here to talk to us and play for us.
I'm very glad to be back. And we have better connection now, and it's all feels great.
Absolutely. This is a Jazziz happy hour, so normally we'd be drinking some cocktails. We're pre-taping because, otherwise you'd be talking to us in the middle of the night in Greece, but you've poured a beverage, no less. What are you drinking over there?
I just got this new coffee machine, and this is a decaf. Otherwise, if it was not a decaf, I would not be able to sleep.
Well, I too am drinking coffee of the caffeinated variety. Cheers to you. Cup. Thank you. Jazziz cup available for sale at the Jazziz store. Thanks for pointing that out, Petros. Cool, man. Well, hey, you're here. You've got the bass behind you. I figured we would get started with performance, man, just to start off with a bang. Sure. I understand you've prepared a special cover of a Ahmad Jamal associated tune for us. What are we going to hear?
I'm going to play Poinciana. As you said, Ahmad Jamal played it in the 50s, and that's how I learned about this tune. But there are so many cool versions online that I recently discovered while, learning the tune and try to adapt it to the double bass.
Cool, man. Can't wait. So this is solo bass rendition of Ahmad Jamal's Poinciana by the one and only Petros Klampanis. Yeah, man. Just gorgeous. Petros, just beautiful, man. I'm curious. I love the way you take full advantage of the bass itself as an instrument. Not only the melodic and harmonic aspects of it, but the percussive aspects of it. You will do things like whistle into the F holds, shake something near the body of the bass. Have you always thought of the bass in this regard as an instrument of unlimited capabilities and not something you just can play pizzicato with or bow?
Well, yes, my approach since the beginning was kind of out of the box, if I may say. I have huge respect to the mainstream way of the bass. Of course, huge respect to all the masters of the bass. But I love the fact that this instrument feels like an undiscovered territory for me, and that's how I started approaching it. I was lucky enough to discover bass, the electric bass, in the beginning through my first teacher. Actually, his name is Yotis Kyrtsoglou. He's a Greek guy, amazing bass player and a very creative artist. He used to be a student of Gary Willis, so he has all this, very melodic and packet kind of playing. But then he brought his personal thing in the instrument, like the harmonic aspects. he still plays with harmonizer. He's a great singer. So this kind of defined my view on the bass, and kind of brought it from the electric to the acoustic, I guess.
Very nice. And I know, what kind of musical culture did you grow up in Greece? What were you listening to as a kid? Was it jazz or other types of music? And what was the native Greek music culture like?
I grew up in Zakynthos. It's an island in the west of Greece, small island. It used to be under Italian occupation, Venetian occupation. So the Greek, like the music from this place, is very different to the rest of Greece. So it's very bel canto, harmonic. There is a vocal tradition. So most of the people sing, and they have beautiful voices, actually. So this is the first music style I got into. I was member of, choirs. I used to play the mandolin and the guitar, and just hanging out with friends, playing tunes that we would learn by ear. So this was the first kind of music experience I used to have. Jazz really came later in my life, when I was 14, I guess 15 years old, through my classical piano teacher that started giving me recordings by Gershwin or Dave Brubeck and Chick Corea. So slowly I pivoted to jazz.
Very nice. You studied in Amsterdam, correct?
Yes.
For university, for college. Classical, or was that jazz as well?
It was jazz performance, bachelor, but I had the chance to learn more about classical music. I had, lessons for harmony lessons and counterpoint lessons, arranging for orchestra and string quartets and stuff. So it was kind of 50-50 in the end of the day. I chose many classical subjects.
Beautiful. Well, I mean, you could still hear so many of those influences in your music, even the singing. I've seen videos, where you're singing in tandem with your bass playing, looping the voice, and then improvising over that voice loop. It's very cool stuff. There's obviously the classical influence too on the new album. You're arranging, you've done quite a bit of arranging for strings, I know. Mm-hmm. So I know the classical influence comes in there as well. And you can kind of see it all on your new album, Irrationalities. It is kind of a beautiful, summation of your career to this point. Tell me about the title of this new album, Irrationalities. What did you mean by that?
Well, it's related to my personal experiences during the time that I wrote the album. Also related to the political scene in the States. The whole album was conceived and started being created in 2016. Mm-hmm. So it was quite a year for the States and for the rest of the world. So many things I felt that didn't make sense to me, the way I had learned things that far in my life. So I kind of had to rediscover myself, rediscover some of the principles that would keep me going and not get depressed or anything, So it was linked to this experience.
Yeah. And we should mention you're based in Greece now, but you usually split your time between New York and Athens. And the kind of confusion, irrational thoughts, irrational fears, have certainly heightened these days. So in a lot of ways, the album is even more applicable. Jeff has gone ahead and pulled up a video for one of your Rooftop series installments. These are very cool, man. This is, back in the days where we could travel. You would take your bass to various cities around the world and set up on a rooftop and just kind of do your thing with the loops, with the overdubs. This is one from Havana, Cuba. Mm-hmm. I love it, man, because it's such a beautiful combination of music and travel log. It's like an Anthony Bourdain episode hosted by a bass player. You get a real feel for the city and the architecture because of this rooftop shot, and you're treated to just some amazing music. How did the idea for this series come about?
It came about because it was the only project that I could honestly share with the world because of my traveling schedule. So started in 2017, and this is an ongoing project. Hopefully, I can continue with this, as you say, music travel episode soon. So I just wanted to present music, and since I was traveling so much, I thought of seize the opportunity and present the music and the cities that I would visit. So there are 5 episodes, I think. One obviously in Athens, and one in Nagasaki in Japan, in Havana, the one that we see right now, one in Tel Aviv, and there is one in New York coming up hopefully soon.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, it's an ongoing project.
And you pick a song based on the identity of the city in some respects, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I try to find a link between the tune and the environment. So for this one, the link is kind of vague because it's a Greek tune, but the rhythm is very similar, I guess, or inspired by Cuban music, and that's I tried to present this link.
Beautiful, man. You are very well traveled as a musician. Are there certain cities you find yourself pulled to, or you just enjoy visiting for whatever reason? The architecture, the culture, the food, the music scene. Mm-hmm. Where are you looking to get back to after all these restrictions are finally lifted?
Well, I love, of course, New York. It's my second house. It's my second home. Because it's so multicultural. We all love New York for so many reasons. And I very much look forward to returning there and join my friends and play music with my collaborators there. I love Barcelona a lot. It feels very familiar because it's a Mediterranean city, but also it's very European and has its own very vivid thing going on. Amazing foods, amazing music. I love Berlin also. It's a very also vivid city. Many young people live there. It's very artsy.
Well, we hope to see you back out there someday. And we, obviously are looking forward to you documenting it via your Rooftop series. Many more to come, we hope. Petros, it would be awesome if we could hear one more tune as we wrap up here. I know you had another one in store for us.
Yeah, I'm gonna play also an optimistic tune. It's my optimistic day, I guess. It's not very usual. I'm gonna play "Smile."
Oh, beautiful!
And yeah.
A Charlie Chaplin composition. Well, we could all use a little optimism these days. So thank you, Petros, for sharing it with us. Yeah, man. An anthem we could all use right now. Smile and a stunning arrangement by Petros Klampanis. I was just explaining, man, that was a tune that we could all use right now. A nice reminder to smile. And that was just a beautiful arrangement of it. A little bit of everything you're known for and that you do so well, you know, the marvelous bass playing ability, obviously, but the voice loops, you know, the percussion. That was great, man.
Thank you.
Had that appeared on a previous album, or was that another new arrangement you've been working on?
It's a new arrangement. I mean, it's not that new. It's never documented. I may include it in the upcoming album. I'm working these days on new music that hopefully will record with a trio soon, and hopefully it's gonna be out in 2021.
Oh, that would be great, man. If people want to follow along until then, you know, maybe listen to music, just see what's going on with you. What's the best place for them to do that?
Obviously, Spotify, my site, YouTube. I just started a page on Bandcamp with all my albums and merch, vinyls and stuff. So I'm kind of everywhere.
Very cool, man. Well, hey, this has been an absolute pleasure talking with you today. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy day to share such wonderful music with us. We certainly appreciate it, man.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Be well. And I hope we meet again.
All the same to you, man. Yeah, we'll get together. We'll drink some coffee or maybe something a little stronger. I don't know. Petros, I'll see you backstage, man. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. Thanks to Petros for, again, sharing such wonderful music with us. His new album, Irrationalities, is out right now. Go stream it. Go buy it on his site. It's really a fascinating listen. And go check out those Rooftop videos, too. They're really cool. Before we bring in our online editor, Matt Micucci, who is waiting in the wings, just want to shout out our friends at Mac Avenue Records. This label has been putting us on the road to great music for more than 20 years now. If you want to start spinning some Mac Avenue music right now, I recommend the new album by saxophonist Jimmy Green. It's called While Looking Up. Beautiful compilation of originals and covers, including an inspired cover of Whitney Houston's I Just Want to Dance with Somebody. If you're into Tower of Power, I know I certainly am, you might want to check out their new album too. It's called Step Up. As I mentioned, both are available right now. To learn more, visit macavenue.com. All right, as I said earlier, waiting in the wings is our one and only online editor, Matt Micucci, here to talk about 5 albums that celebrate their 50th anniversary in 2020. My, how time flies. Matt Micucci, welcome to the show, man.
Wow, I'm back. I can't believe it. Wasn't I here yesterday or something?
Long time no see. It's good to have you back. And you've got some exciting news in store for us. We're going to be talking about 5 albums that turned 50 in 2020. Yeah. So these were albums obviously released in 1970, if I could do my math correct. But firstly, this is we keep this show topical. I have some news for you. This is news out of Albany Medical College here in the States. Mice, apparently, it's been proven that mice prefer jazz music to classical music when under the influence of drugs. So I don't know
what
I don't know what that says about jazz.
I don't know what that says about human beings.
Or Albany Medical College. But this came up in my news feed this morning, and hey, I'll take it. We could use the jazz fans, I guess.
I wonder if there's ever been like something like that, but with cats, Have they ever tried to see whether cats really like jazz?
Well, according to Disney, cats love jazz.
That's
Everybody
true.
wants to be a cat. But hey, man, thanks for coming on the show. We are talking about 5 albums that turned 50 in 2020. Now, obviously, there are a bunch of albums that turned 50 in 2020, but you selected 5 noteworthy ones. And I'd love to hear about them, my friend.
Oh, I'm a little nervous about this one because these are big. These are big albums, and I think a lot of people. I was listening to a bit of your conversation with Petros there, and you mentioned confusion there, the word confusion at some point, and that's funny because I've been thinking about the year 1970 as a year of confusion. Now, that may sound like a terrible thing, but actually it's not, because I'm thinking of confusion in the terms of Bergson. He was a philosopher who basically wrote many books about the concept of time. And one of his concepts was that confusion is actually great because it's a moment that's basically filled with a multiplicity of sensations. And so therefore it's filled with like a possibility. And that's exactly what 1970 is, because it kind of was a year that marked the end of an era in some sense and the beginning of a new era. The fact that it was the first year of a new decade is a little coincidental, but definitely handy, because in 1970, people were just talking about timelines all the time. Anyways, that's kind of going to be my driving theme for going through this list, because I realized that there's already a video out there where there's basic information about each of the albums that we'll be talking about. And also just... I don't know. I thought it might be a good idea to just talk about these albums in a more sort of personal way, like come up with some crazy theories about what the music stands for and all of that. So I don't know what you think about that, Brian.
Totally, man. Well, you really class up this show, my friend, dropping Bergman references, getting into critical studies. I appreciate that, man. You can leave the crazy theories to me as long as you handle the philosophies. But yeah, I say let's do it, man. That sounds like a great idea.
Conspiracy theories. What do you think about Alice Coltrane? Brian, what do you think about her? She's great, isn't she?
She is absolutely great. And, a lot of people know her for her later work as a harpist, obviously, and sort of getting into the transcendental jazz movement. But she also did some incredible work as a piano player in the straight ahead vein. So, yeah, Alice, an icon really in this music.
Great. So this is the first album that of the list. It's pretty solid. It's Patadi El Daoud. Of course, I'm still not sure whether that's actually how it's pronounced, but it's interesting because this album is basically, I've mentioned a couple of things in the video about it, the music and all of that stuff. But what's interesting about this, and I don't think I mentioned it in the video, is the title itself, because it refers to an Egyptian god. And this Egyptian god, now, if I'm getting this wrong, please let me know and I will apologize for it. I'll make a whole video where I'm like, I'm sorry, I got this one wrong. But as far as I understand it, he was a creator of the universe, but also basically was a guy in charge for the actual building of the universe. So it's a very physical thing. He's a very physical god. So it's that mixture of spirituality and physicality that I think kind of illustrates what Alice Coltrane does with her music, especially on this album, because the improvisation is wild, beautiful, great. There's plenty of space for musicians to go crazy. And when Pharoah Sanders starts blowing, that's really when things start going wild. But also it's kind of a controlled chaos. I feel there's definitely a context there, and people are quite respectful of it. But besides all that, I think that the standout composition from this album is just Blue Nile. And for anyone who is not familiar with Alice Coltrane, it's just a wonderful place to start. I feel like it is the best place to start, and then just work your way out, because she's got wilder stuff out there. But there you go. That's my thoughts on that album.
Number one, beautiful. Yeah, it is. This was kind of the height of spirit jazz. Obviously that genre has continued into this day, to the extent that Joey DeFrancisco, the organist, just put out a kind of tribute to spirit jazz album. But this is kind of the height of it, the pinnacle of it. And yeah, Alice Coltrane was a major figure in that movement. So number one, nice place to start, Matt. Yeah. What is next on the list?
Yeah, this one is interesting. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you the same thing for each of these artists I'll talk about first. The Art Ensemble of Chicago. Are you a fan?
Am I a fan? Absolutely. Absolutely. Major Lester Bowie fan. I mean, they really just changed the game in terms of not only what avant-garde creative music could be, but what an independent artist network could look like. Do it yourself. That punk rock energy, they brought it to jazz in the 1970s. So yeah,
definitely. And so this is interesting, because I feel like this album is probably the least talked about of the 5 on this list. Now, I could be wrong about this one, but it's kind of a lot has been said about this period of the band, but the album itself, not so much. And maybe it's because it was a soundtrack album, and maybe it's because the fact that it is a soundtrack album, almost like it's perceived differently by people when people evaluate albums. But for sure, what stands out to me about this was that it capped off a formative period for the band, which they spent in Paris in France. And in fact, as far as I understand, this album was recorded 2 weeks before they left France. So it definitely capped off the period during which they really flourished. And what truly stands out about this is the experimentation and the varied nature of the program itself, because we start off with an R&B number and it's a vocal R&B number. And if anyone has ever heard it, they'll know what I'm talking about when I say that sometimes it really feels like the song just explodes at certain points. And it's the most exciting sound ever. And then just carries on. It's like it has these moments of explosion here and there, and then just carries on doing its things. Pretty straightforward by the standard, especially when compared to some of the other tracks in the album, because it get very abstract at times, gets very atmospheric, very exotic, amazingly varied. It just shows that this was a band where each of the musicians, and even as a collective group, they had many interests on various types of music, and they were not afraid to experiment with them. So again, we're talking about experimentation and confusion, but in a positive way.
Another beautiful description, Matt. Though, did we forget the name of the album?
Did we forget? L'Estance à Sophie. Yeah, I forgot to mention that. L'Estance à Sophie. And that's also the title of the film for which it was a soundtrack.
Very cool.
Which nobody knows that film, by the way. Completely forgotten.
The soundtrack has overtaken, the legacy of the film.
And I'm a huge film fan.
Yeah.
I'm a huge film fan, but that period was a golden age of French film, and there were too many great films that one has just gotten lost in the mix. Thank God for the music, though. That has not disappeared. I don't think it's as available as other albums, though. I may be wrong, but if you're looking to stream it on Spotify, I don't think it's there. Anyway,
you have to buy it the old-fashioned way. A
Yeah,
vinyl record
definitely.
or a CD.
Oh, best way, vinyl
Like the
records.
good
Yeah.
old days. All right,
Well,
Matt.
Brian, this is the one, isn't it? It's I don't know if maybe this is the lesser known of the 5 albums. What do you say? Bitches Brew.
Never heard of it.
Never heard of it, right?
Just kidding. No, obviously one of Miles Davis's absolute masterpieces. Kind of the album that in a lot of ways kicked off the fusion movement, at least on a popular scale. So much lore into the making of this album. Apparently the recording session was this kind of frenzied, chaotic, just brainstorm of a session that resulted in, one of the most enduring albums in the history of jazz. So
Tio, play it again, Tio. Play that one, Tio. I love that. I love hearing
Miles
the sound.
Davis calling the shots in the recording studio, telling his producer exactly what he wants.
I think, this is what my plan was, just like, this is going to be the one that I talk less about, because I feel like there's so much that's been said about this album that I can't add anything to the discourse. But then I thought, I was listening to this album a few days ago while I was putting the list together, and I knew that this should be in the middle, because if we're talking about documentation of the confusion that was happening in a year that, as I said, was kind of a transitory year between an older age and a newer age, this is it. It really captures what was happening in terms of the experimentation with different cultures, modern styles of production, modern sounds. Like you said, rock was definitely a presence there. Nobody needs me to talk about, get really into, and talk in detail about the production techniques that were used, because they were too revolutionary. And but this is what I wanted to focus on, because I really feel like this is the album that best represents why, when people talk about Miles Davis, they talk about him not just as a great jazz artist, but also as one of the greatest artists across all art forms of the 20th century, compared by people who don't like jazz to people like, I don't know, Picasso or James Joyce. And again, going back to this concept of time, it's because here I feel like he's really trying to get a hold of time, to control it, to expand the present, which is why the splicing technique really worked well, which is why he always, before the musicians even stopped playing the part, would be like, play that part for me again, Tio. This is him trying to really control whatever is happening in the moment, and what comes out of it, I think, is just a fantastic work. It's really something to get excited about. This is one of the albums that really got me into jazz, and I feel like a lot of people would say the same thing.
Absolutely. And here Jeff has gone and brought up that kind of iconic album cover. Was recorded in 1969, which goes without saying, a pivotal year in music history, especially American music history, released in 1970. And we should remember it was kind of received with mixed results. I mean, similar to Dylan plugging in. People weren't that hip to it. They didn't like, some of the hardcore jazz fans who were used to Miles in acoustic setting weren't really hip to all the synths, the double drums, double guitars. It felt a little raucous to them. But it has gone on to, a life of its own. And a lot of those critics have come around to seeing how this was a major groundbreaking moment for jazz.
Yeah, for sure. It upset a lot of purists. That was a big deal.
But, as all the best art tends to do. But anyways, Matt, Miles Davis, Bitches Brew had to be on this list. That is number 3. What is number 4?
Pharoah Sanders, Deaf, Dumb, Blind. Well, he's great, isn't he? He's great too. He's another great. He's another master.
Absolutely.
Actually, he's making the second appearance on this list, because he was, of course, in Alice Coltrane's Patati Out, a frequent collaborator of Alice Coltrane. And one of the great soloists of his time, but really also a master of the free jazz genre, the spiritual free jazz genre in particular, in the sense that his work's very, very spiritual. Actually, the thing about this is that, again, just to say something that I haven't said in the video, is that I always saw it as a bit of a concept album. And if anyone knows more about this, because again, I kind of struggle to find precise information about this. And my access to physical books about whatever to do my research now is limited, because I'm stuck in Prague and at home. due to circumstances that you probably know about. But just looking online, I haven't been able to really see whether this is true or not. But it seems to me like the fact that this album is basically split into two parts, it makes this a concept album in the sense that both parts represent bliss, represents a blissful state, but one of the sides is more frantic, more fierce, and it's one type of bliss, represented by multiculturality, a lot of percussion, a lot of noise, a lot of chants, very tribal, and all of that stuff. But the second side then is different again because it's more lush, it's more prayer-like and more blissful, let's say, in the traditional sense. It has been compared to a prayer B-side. So it's two ways of representing a blissful state, I feel. And as well as that, given the fact that I have mentioned time basically on every entry that I've discussed here, I do feel that just the general multiculturality, the African music traditions and the American more modern traditions, but also the older traditions as well, you could say, it's almost like this album has a time traveling element to it, where you don't quite feel where you're at time-wise. And yeah, if you close your eyes, it definitely takes you places.
Totally. And, we'd seen the influence of, Middle Eastern and African music in jazz through such albums, by the likes of John Coltrane, Don Cherry. But, this album by Pharoah Sanders really took it to a new height and kind of continued that legacy into a new decade, the 70s, where, this was the fusion era. So you had a lot of influence from fusions of the rock and roll sort, people kind of bringing funk and soul influences into jazz. And Pharoah Sanders was really instrumental in making sure they maintained kind of that world jazz aesthetic carried over from that 60s period, of people like Coltrane, of people like Don Cherry, so on and so forth. So again, a pivotal album in its own right, but also the continuation of a legacy. So nice inclusion there, Matt.
For sure. It's beautiful. So this is the fifth and final one in the list, and maybe then we can talk about possible honorable mentions. I don't know, some that come to mind, but Soft Machine. So we're in the European territory.
Right on. Yeah. Soft Machine, a very important kind of fusion ensemble from Europe. And yeah, man, which album did you pick?
Well, third, that was the album that was released this year. And it was really the album that transitioned them into the more jazzy territory. And, again, there was a structure to the list this time around because started the list with an album that is very spiritual. On the other hand, third, while some may argue that it does have its spiritual moments, I feel like it represents something else, something scientific in a way, because like we said, the 1970 and the 70s and the year after as well represented a time of experimentation, some of which was with electronics, for example. But it just in general, it was definitely a time where, there was a lot of, what happens if I press this button? What happens if I put this bit there? What happens if I do this? So the process itself became something that was just as fascinating sometimes as the music. And if you're looking for an album that sort of represents that and where you can actually hear the process as well as the music and get lost in either one, third is definitely one of them, because and that's probably why it does sound a bit more raw. In some moments of the album, it sounds like, should that be there? That was that left there by mistake, that type of thing. But that's because of the process itself being such a fascinating aspect of the work as a whole, that definitely makes it an essential album that was released this year, in my opinion. But and you could argue that it's very, very similar to what Miles Davis did with Bitches Brew. But this is kind of like my personal take on the comparison between the two albums, is that when it comes to Bitches Brew, despite the fact that we all know that so many great musicians were involved in that album, we know that the final product was very much like, Miles Davis work. He was the sculptor. He was the guy who put the whole thing together, and just that was his vision at the end. He was just trying to make sense of the whole chaos. But on this album, every musician has a say. Every individual musician has their say, and it really does feel like it's a collaborative effort, even when they play compositions that were actually written or structured by an individual member of the band. So that, I think, is where the main difference between the two albums is.
Absolutely. And it's a great listen because it's kind of the sound of transition. You're hearing for what it for all intents and purposes was a kind of psychedelic rock band transition into more of a jazz vein. And so you hear that transformation, you hear that metamorphosis, you hear some of the rough edges. It is very much a moving piece. You hear some tape hiss, you hear just some unpolished stuff that makes it a very real, very authentic work. And that collaborative nature you were talking about, of really everyone getting on the same page and locking into that telepathic mindset, I think comes from the group's very conscious transition from more of a psychedelic rock aesthetic to something like jazz. So cool. Nice pick.
Thank you, Brian.
Rounding out the list at number 5. Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you whether you had any albums from 1970 that come to mind that weren't in the list. I did mention at the end of the video that I made, if anyone had any suggestions, let me know, and we may even record a second video about this specific topic. And I would love to know, because I can think of a few, but I was just wondering whether you could think of any off the top of your head. It's a kind of a tricky question, because like a specific year, it's kind of tricky. But
geez, I'm thinking now. I just pulled it. I know not jazz per se, but here at Jazziz, we like to call them gateway drug bands. Didn't Chicago release their self-titled album Chicago in 1970?
It's possible that they released it around the same time, but it's funny that you mentioned that, because I know that Kool and the Gang released their self-titled album in 1970. So that's another sort of an album that has influences of jazz. I think in some parts it definitely is very, very much influenced by jazz. But no, I've got 3. And let me see if you think that they should have been worthy of being mentioned here, or perhaps are worthy for a second video. Charlie Hayden's Liberation Music Orchestra.
Oh, absolutely.
I know that was a tough one to leave out.
I know picking 5, it's, you're obviously going to leave some great ones on the cutting room floor, but Charlie Hayden, a very honorable mention.
It's just a starting point, this list. But then we've got Freddie Hubbard's Red Clay. And
one of my favorite albums ever.
I know. John Coltrane's Transition was released it was recorded in 65, but released in 1970. So that could have been included in there. So I don't want to mention too many, because I'm hoping that some people may be looking at this video and go like, "Wow, why didn't you include this one?" I hope people I want people to get angry with me.
Well, that certainly won't be hard, man. No.
Yeah,
you're a very agreeable guy, my friend. I'm just thinking about the gap that exists between 1970 and 2020, those 50 years. And I'm kind of curious, which half of the gap do you think saw more change, not just on a musical level, but just on a cultural, technological level? I mean, you think from 1970 to 1995, we had the dawn of the internet, so many things, the arrival of hip hop, and then from 1995 to 2020, you've got musically, you've got streaming services, you've got, the decline of the CD. That's kind of a tough question. Which half saw more change?
I don't know. So let's think about this. 1970. No, I still think after 1970, because also in the way in which music was distributed. If we're talking about the 20th century, I think that definitely, especially like in the last few years, I think that things are going wild. It's crazy, and sometimes it's even hard to tell whether, like when we compile the list of 10 albums, sometimes people may disagree with the entries in that list, because people might go like, "That's not jazz, surely."
Right.
But then the spirit itself can be, at this point, could possibly be considered as jazz, especially because we live in a world where so much information is available to us, and that also translates to music, in my opinion. But it definitely is an interesting conversation for sure. What do you think, Brian?
It's hard to say. I think you hit the nail on the head. Really, when the internet took off and the speeds reached the speeds that they are now, there was just an exponential change in how we consume content. music specifically. So I don't know. It was just a little thought experiment I put out there. And
I think as well, just to add a little bit, because it is fascinating to talk about these things. I think as well that our perception of time in terms of jazz especially has changed, because now when we experience something by whether it be Miles Davis or whether it be Louis Armstrong and his early music, now it becomes a part of the present. And sometimes we forget that up to not too long ago, a lot of these recordings wouldn't even have been readily available to people. So it is fascinating how within the course of a day, we can actually find ourselves listening to something from the 1920s or the 1970s or today and not even think about it. And that fact alone makes me think that the concept of time itself, especially when we talk about art and especially when we talk about jazz, because jazz is not seen as a pop music to a certain extent, especially among the younger generations right now. It does allow, I think, a more encouraging exploration. It really does, and jazz's music itself, I've always thought this is the music that more than any other music plays with the concept of time. So an album that is released now and may not seem as popular now would probably is more liable to be listened to 20 years from now if it's a jazz album than something that is at the top of the charts today, because it just ages differently.
Yeah. Beautifully said, Matt. Big ideas from our one and only online editor, Matt Micucci, here to share 5 noteworthy albums that turned 50 in 2020. Matt, I cannot wait to talk to you again in 2070 when we talk about how these albums turned 100 or we're old, a little older and grayer and wrinklier. No, I hope to have you on before that, man. Hey, this has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thanks for sharing these albums. I'm going to go ahead and listen to them today to celebrate. And thanks a lot, man.
Thank you very much, Brian. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Take care, Matt. So long. All right. Thanks to Matt Micucci for sharing with us 5 essential albums that turned 50 in 2020. I hope you all go out and take a listen. In the meantime, if you want to consider a subscription, now's the time to do so. We are offering a special subscription offer right now. For just 99 cents for 3 months, you can unlock unlimited digital access to all the content on our website. Plus, we will enroll you to receive our forthcoming print issue that's coming out in June. That's our summer 2020 issue. It is all about fusion. Again, you sign up right now for 99 cents for just 3 months. You unlock unlimited digital access. Plus, you receive that complimentary print issue in your mailbox come June, all about fusion. Chick Corea is the cover subject. There's a wide-ranging interview with him. We also talk to some young fusion musicians who are doing their thing to keep the fusion flame alive. Also, I get asked this question a lot by independent artists. Hey, I just released an album and I would love to get it reviewed by Jazziz magazine. How do I do so? The best way to do that, our Inside Track program. This is a service that we offer to independent musicians. You simply go to our website, click submit your music, and send us everything about your album. The album name, the track listing, personnel. You can send us a link to Bandcamp or SoundCloud. We'll take a listen to the album. This comes to my inbox. This comes to online editor Matt Micucci's inbox. This comes to all of our inboxes here at Jazziz, and I promise we do listen to this music. We also put it up on our site so that other people can listen to it. You want to browse albums from artists all over the world, you can do so via our Inside Track program. But I encourage all independent artists and friends of independent artists, check out Inside Track and send me your music. I can't wait to listen. Coming up on the program tomorrow, journalist Mark Stryker is going to be talking to us about the history of jazz in Detroit. And on Friday, we're going to wrap things up with Linda Pearl. She's a vocalist, has a new album out right now. You may know her as Fonzie's girlfriend from Happy Days, or as Pam's mom from The Office. So not only is she a great actor, but she's a phenomenal jazz vocalist as well. Once again, I'm Brian Zimmerman. Thanks for joining me for the happy hour. We'll see you tomorrow, everyone. Bye.